If you are young, ambitious, and wondering why your money doesn't go as far as it used to, you need to pay attention. The next global economic shock is actively unfolding right now, even while mainstream media focuses on temporary headlines. We are tracking a severe financial chain reaction triggered by the escalating conflict involving Iran, a situation that has already begun to move the gears of the global market. The harsh truth of global economics is that the consequences are often delayed. Even if the news suggests a period of calm, the real financial weight hasn't settled on the average person yet. Most people will not recognize the shift until they see the impact on their own savings. Today, I am breaking down the 6 direct impacts this crisis will have on your finances and showing you the specific actions you can take to shield your wealth from the fallout. Impact number 1 is the hidden cost of everything. There is a common misconception that if a conflict pauses, the economic pressure disappears. But the economy is like a biological system. Once a toxin is introduced, removing the source doesn't instantly clear the damage. The impact is already working through the pipes. Consider the vulnerability of the Strait of Hormuz. In any scenario where this passage is constricted, energy markets react violently. In some projections, a full closure would cause oil prices to nearly double almost overnight. Oil is the invisible ingredient in everything you buy. It creates a layered cake of costs. Because fuel is the primary input for harvesting, packaging, and transporting goods, every price increase at the pump is mathematically destined to show up on the shelf. This means your grocery bill is set to rise regardless of what happens in the headlines next week. You need to evaluate your large financial commitments now, rather than assuming the cost of living will return to old levels. That brings us to impact number 2. Your paycheck is in danger. Imagine a guy named Joey. Joey has a comfortable 9-to-5 job, and he assumes that as long as he shows up, global macro trends won't affect his mortgage. Joey doesn't see the corporate squeeze. Rising manufacturing costs crush his company from one side, while customers spending less squeeze the other. This forces triage, cutting overtime, freezing hiring, and eventually reducing their largest expense, firing Joey. Contrast Joey's path with someone like Kai, who recognizes the fragility of a single income stream. By building an independent digital business, Kai makes herself economically irreplaceable. In this environment, your current income is only as safe as your ability to adapt. If you think the government can simply print a way out of this, you need to understand impact number 3, the broken safety net. In previous crises, central banks could cut rates and inject liquidity to stop the bleeding. This time, the patient has developed a resistance to the medicine. The math is unsustainable. The United States is now spending roughly $1 trillion a year just to pay the interest on its existing debt. This is a structural trap where interest payments begin to consume the very capital needed to stimulate growth. It's no longer about whether the government wants to help. It's about whether they have any remaining tools that won't destroy the value of the currency they're trying to save. If they cut rates to help the economy, they risk sending inflation into a vertical climb. If they keep rates high to save the dollar, they risk a systemic collapse of the credit markets. Relying on a government rescue in this cycle is a high-risk gamble. Their primary mechanisms for intervention are currently paralyzed by the weight of their own balance sheet. Impact number 4 is stagflation. It's the most difficult economic environment to escape. Like quicksand, where struggling only pulls you down faster. Stagflation hits when the economy halts, causing jobs to rapidly disappear, while prices of goods keep rising. It breaks standard supply and demand. It creates a nightmare policy loop. The traditional tools used to fight a recession, like lower rates, actually accelerate inflation. Meanwhile, the tools used to stop inflation, like higher rates, make the recession deeper. We saw this in the 1970s. Once stagflation takes hold, it can persist for an entire decade, slowly eroding the purchasing power of anyone holding cash. To survive a decade of stagflation, you have to shift your focus. Cash becomes a liability as it loses value every day. The only way to preserve wealth is by moving into real, tangible assets. Impact number 5 is the declining dollar. For decades, the US dollar has functioned as the global language of business. Even if countries don't trust each other, They have traditionally trusted the stability of the dollar to settle their trades. But that trust is fraying. Foreign central banks are now reducing their holdings of U.S. treasuries and are instead aggressively accumulating physical gold at a rate we haven't seen in the modern era. They see the trap. If the U.S. prints more money to cover its debt, the dollar's value drops. If it tries to protect the dollar by keeping rates high, it risks a liquidity crisis that could crash the entire stock market. This creates a global contagion. When the world's reserve currency begins to fluctuate, every other currency tied to it begins to lose its footing. The end result for you is a steady decline in your local purchasing power. No matter where you live or what currency you use, a weakening global dollar means your money simply buys less than it did yesterday. The final impact is the great wealth transfer. In every crisis, there are those who lose and those who gain. These events aren't just chaotic accidents. They are moments where wealth is rapidly redistributed. When governments try to intervene with top-down measures like price controls, the capital often finds a way to flow upward. This creates a funnel effect, where the middle class gets squeezed while large institutions capture the remaining value. We saw this during recent energy crises. While small businesses and households struggled with rising costs, the largest energy corporations reported billions in profits. The system is designed to protect the top, often at the expense of the middle. But by understanding these mechanics, you can change your position. Instead of being a passive victim of the systemic cascade, you can focus on financial literacy and asset protection to secure your own future. If you want to continue learning how to navigate this economic shock and grow your wealth despite the chaos, please subscribe, like, and share this video to help others stay ahead of the curve. Thanks for watching.